Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Isaac Kamola. I teach political science and international relations at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. And I also direct the Center for the Defense of Academic Freedom at the American Association of University Professors. The AAUP is the organization that advocates and defines academic freedom in American context. And the center was created at the AAUP to provide resources for faculty within American institutions pushing back on academic freedom. I've also had the good fortune to serve on the ISA's Academic Freedom Committee. And in that context, it's become incredibly clear that the attacks on academic freedom in the US are not unique to the United States, but also that what academic freedom means and how these attacks play are similar in a global context, but also have distinct features. And so this webinar is a collaboration between the International Studies Association and the AAUP Center for the Defense of Academic Freedom in order to try to begin to map out kind of what the attacks on academic freedom look like in that global context. So I'll hand it over to Carolyn Shaw, who will moderate the discussion. Carolyn is a professor of political science at Wichita State University, is author of Cooperation, Conflict, and Consensus in the Organization of American States and numerous other research articles, and is also the chair. I have a really great fortune to serve under Carolyn, who's the chair of ISA's Academic Freedom Committee. She's an excellent chair and an incredible advocate for academic freedom, and she'll be leading our discussion today. So I'll hand it over to you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Isaac. And I appreciate you helping pull together this panel and a follow-on panel that we'll be looking forward to in the future. It's my pleasure to be able to moderate this event. Each of our speakers will be sharing some prepared remarks, and then we will move to a Q&A time. If you have questions at any point, you're welcome to submit those by clicking on the QA button on the bottom of your Zoom screen next to the share button, and I will share these with the panelists as they come in. I'd like to take just a moment before I introduce the panelists to talk a little bit more about the work of the Academic Freedom Committee at ISA. And I will just note that most scholars facing challenges to academic freedom don't have an option to leave their institutions or their countries. And so the advocacy work that's done in that organization is to really help scholars across the world to be able to continue to engage in their research activities and their teaching with the freedom that we want to see for everyone. The Academic Freedom Committee was created by ISA's Governing Council in 2009, and the AFC is charged with protecting academic freedom of scholars in all disciplines related to international studies, beginning with but not limited to scholars that are members of the ISA. And the committee receives information about violations of academic freedom. It makes a judgment as to the merits, and then it recommends to the executive committee a position for the ISA to take. And in addition, the committee may, in consultation with the president and executive director, publicize the threat or the violation through newsletters or through other relevant means. And as I said, this is important work because most of the scholars who experience threats don't have a lot of options to leave their institution or to leave their country. The AFC may also recommend that ISA join official advocacy efforts of peer organizations or express its concerns directly to relevant government officials. So this is kind of what the work looks like for the committee. If there's anyone in the audience who wants to reach us, the email that you can reach us at is academic-freedom@isa.net. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our speakers. We have with us Audrey Truschke from Rutgers University. Audrey is a professor of South Asian history, and her research focuses on the cultural, imperial, and intellectual history of medieval and early modern India, as well as the politics of history in modern times. She is the author of 4 books, including India, 5,000 Years of History on the Subcontinent with Princeton University Press. Audrey served for 3 years as the chair of the Rutgers AAUP Academic Freedom Committee. We also have with us Andrea Petto from Central European University. Andrea is a professor in the Department of Gender Studies at Central European University in Vienna and a research affiliate at the CEU Democracy Institute in Budapest. Her research and public engagement center on the contested category of gender, examining the links between illiberalism and anti-gender movements, while advocating for historical knowledge and open public dialogue as foundations for democratic rights-based societies. She is an internationally recognized scholar whose works have been translated into 25 languages, and her publications include The Women of the Arrow Cross Party and Forgotten Massacre, Budapest, 1944. And our last speaker is Kasia Kaczmarska, who is a senior lecturer in politics and international relations at the University of Edinburgh. Her research interests center on knowledge construction and the ways in which the social political context influences academic knowledge making and use. In particular, Kasia aims to understand the challenges to academic freedom arising from authoritarian settings. So we are very lucky to have these folks with us today, and I will turn things over first to Audrey.
Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. So, as mentioned, I'm a professor of South Asian history, so I'm going to be talking to you predominantly about academic freedom in South Asia. And I've broken my comments into sort of 3 basic categories. First, I want to give just a little background on the general state of affairs and sort of what the academic freedom and freedom of speech landscape looks like in South Asian nations, okay, because it's not super great. And then I want to discuss 2 major modes of state-sponsored infringement on academic freedom in South Asia: transnational repression and far-right student groups, okay? Now, I'm going to be predominantly discussing India today, and that's for ease more than anything else. India is the most populous South Asian nation by a long shot. It's also seen the steepest decline in academic freedom in the region in recent years. This is associated with the rise of the BJP and their political ideology known as Hindu nationalism. Okay, the BJP has run India since 2014. So a little bit on the general state of affairs on the ground. Okay, so each nation is unique. I'm going to try to cover a little bit of other nations. There are 8 nations, by the way, that comprise modern South Asia. The 3 biggest ones, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, share some major things in common. One of those is that they all inherited the bulk of their legal framework from the British Raj. Okay, so these nations have been independent for decades now, but their legal system is largely still colonial in its origin. In that colonial or originated legal system, there are a series of laws that restrict freedom of speech. Okay, so there's nothing approaching the First Amendment. All right. A notable law is that deliberate and malicious offense to religious sentiments is illegal in all 3 nations. This law is still on the books, and it tends to be applied to religious minorities as well as scholars. So for religious minorities, it essentially makes blasphemy illegal. It's a useful tool for oppressing your religious minorities. For academics, it's a powerful censorship tool, because consider that there are hundreds of thousands of people in Pakistan and Bangladesh, respectively, well over 1 billion people in India. Somebody's religious sentiments are offended by literally everything. Okay? This law can be applied, of course, to folks within India, and it's also a problem for those of us on the outside. When people like me publish books in India, we have to get them past attorneys in order to comply with the nation's anti-free speech laws. Second thing to note as a general thing is sort of democracy problems. And again, South Asian nations are different in this regard, but most do not have healthy functioning democracies. Not even India, which surprises some people, but Freedom House downgraded India years ago now to an electoral autocracy. So they hold elections, but democracy isn't doing well. I want to mention the Academic Freedom Index. Okay, this is a very useful tool, and it is weak for all South Asian nations. Okay, India has gone down sharply in recent years. India currently ranks 156 out of 179 nations. So that's in the bottom 20%. In terms of explaining that severe drop-off, right? So all the background I said before is relevant here. But what does that actually look like on the ground? Okay, with that, I want to turn to my sort of two case studies here. And the first is transnational repression. So the Indian state, right, currently run by far-right ethno-nationalists, has an array of tools at its disposal for compelling the submission of academics as well as students. Okay, these tools include, and this is for folks centered in India, political takeovers of universities. Okay, we've seen India's BJP, this leading political party, appoint ideologues in many key university positions to distinguished professors' chairs, vice chancellors, that's roughly the equivalent of like a president of an American university. That agenda has been highly visible in the last decade. A second tool is syllabi control. Many syllabi are set at sort of the university level in India. There's like committees that do this. So if you control the committee, you control what people can teach in the classroom. A third example is requiring permission for Indian-based academics to host or attend any conferences, including online ones. Okay, that means you can deny permission for any sort of questionable events. All right, and that is permission given by the state. A fourth example is denying funds for hosting outside speakers. What this does is it weakens Indian universities sort of from within and kind of isolates them from a broader global academic discourse. Those are all tools that are predominantly used by the Indian state and affiliated groups against their own scholars, right? There's additional tools that the Indian state uses both against their own scholars as well as Indian origin scholars that now live and work outside of India. Okay, whether they're Indian citizens or citizens of another nation. These include, if you say the wrong things, hang out with the wrong people, freezing bank accounts. Okay, the Indian government does that. Sending goons to show up to the house. It can be your house, it could be your uncle's house, it could be your cousin's house, your nephew's house, whoever. Outside of India, the Indian state does increasingly use state surveillance of what Indian origin folks are doing in the US and in Europe. Okay, and they're sort of modeling themselves on Chinese state surveillance there, for those familiar with that. Then we can add in a third group. Okay, so we have academics who are living and working in India, Indian origin academics who are living and working elsewhere, maybe citizens of other nations. Add in a third group, which are non-South Asian descent academics who do not have family in South Asia. Against all three of these groups, the Indian state can control access to India. They will withhold people's passports. They will withhold OCI cards for Indian origin folks to go into India, and they will cancel visas. We just had a fairly prominent case of this in the last week or two of Francesca Orsini, a scholar of Hindi who is based in London, who has never been the center of any controversy. She was turned away at the border, told she had been blacklisted. And then last, we are all subjected to violence or threats of violence across borders. Now, we're currently in a moment, which may not last that much longer, we'll see, where American law enforcement actually cares about transnational repression of that last sort, right? Violent threats by the Indian state or affiliated actors. And that is because an Indian origin gentleman, an Indian national, who is associated with the BJP, tried to assassinate an Indian American, so an American citizen in California in 2023. That case opens in New York City in less than 2 weeks. Okay, it opens 2 weeks from last Monday, I believe. The guy got caught because he hired a hitman who was an FBI undercover agent. All right. Now, we have yet to have, as far as I know, an attempted assassination of an academic, but I think there's a fear that we're heading there. Or I should say an academic outside of India. Within India, they have had that. But there's fear we're heading there because that's sort of the trajectory. Last thing I want to comment on are far-right student groups. Okay, so you need just a little bit more background here. So you know about Hindu nationalism. Okay, it's been promoted over the last century by a bunch of groups. The main one is called the RSS. It was founded 100 years ago. It's a paramilitary all-male group. One of the first additional Hindu nationalist groups that the RSS founded back in the late 1940s, right after Indian independence, is called the ABVP. Okay, if you don't know what it stands for, don't worry about that. The ABVP, this is a student group. Today, every major Indian college and university has an ABVP chapter. Now, ABVP members are college students. They're enrolled, they're taking classes, that sort of thing. But they're also far-right operatives, and they have ongoing direct links with the paramilitary RSS. Hindu nationalism is a violent ideology, if you haven't figured that one out yet. So when you combine this embrace of violence with the vigor of youth with the RSS's resources, well, the ABVP is really violent, okay? They'll protest academic events. Those protests often turn violent. They will rough up professors. They trash people's homes and university spaces. The last case where this happened was like literally 2 weeks ago. Now, the ABVP is a really powerful tool in the Hindu nationalist arsenal, in part because they can always fall back on being students, right? It's like this veneer of cover. How dare you accuse us of all this stuff? We're just college students. All the while, those students are accessing vast resources outside of the university, right? Does that sound a little familiar to anyone? Because to me, it sounds a little bit similar to what we're seeing right now on American college campuses, especially with groups like TPUSA. So briefly looking ahead, okay, academic freedom is not on a good trajectory in South Asia, sorry to report. But one thing that I'll highlight just in closing is that, because this is a big issue I feel in the West as well right now as well, part of why South Asian academic freedom has been weak for a long time, right? There was not some previous point in time where it was like super strong. And part of that is because of the idea embedded in the laws of many South Asian nations that people should be protected from offense. That is a toxic idea, in my view. Academics should be very free to offend people. We can reasonably hope, of course, that Hindu nationalists will lose control of India someday, and then academic freedom will improve. But there is a ceiling on that improvement, because more fulsome academic freedom does require more fulsome and more messy freedom of speech, even when people really dislike it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Audrey. I appreciate those comments on the context. Next up is Andrea Petto.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And I would like to talk about this illiberal script in higher education, because it is not a surprise that there are similarities between India and the US and Hungary and Mexico, because there is an illiberal script in higher education. I wrote a lot about this. So this will be, if you can help me to put the references in the chat, you can read some of my works on the transformation of the higher education into an illiberal higher education. And what I would like to talk to you today is about this academic authorization and how this is used by the illiberal, how is it a part of the illiberal script, and how the liberal script is hijacking the academic authorization system in order to create a new elite instead of the so-called legacy elite in higher education. So why does this matter? And because the reference point of higher education is coming from the evaluation. This is good, this is bad. And the illiberal script, according to the liberal script, this kind of reference point should be destroyed and replaced by academic authorization system, which has got two aims: to delegitimize knowledge production and to destroy the systems which are sharing this particular knowledge. Via academic authorization, science policy secures the legitimacy of all other illiberal states' activities. Illiberal politicians and oligarchs alike recognize the importance of educational institutions as sites of knowledge production and transfer, training of loyal supporters, academic authorization, and dissemination of ideas abroad. Just in brackets, we know that how these ideas are actually traveling the illiberal higher education, how the country I know the best, Hungary, actually contributed so much to the project 2025, both theoretically and also practically, because Hungary served as a laboratory testing all those illiberal ideas. So illiberal spin doctors have similarly acknowledged that the academic authority granted by different different organizations are necessarily not only legitimize the ideological agenda, but more importantly, they secure employment for loyal supporters who will train further loyal supporters who then will take over the already existing educational and research institutions. So basically, this is a tool for replacing the elite. The emergence of illiberal science policy also raises serious questions about scientific authorization process, as the rapid spread of illiberal science policies, such as closing accredited study programs, like it happened with the 2-year MA program in gender studies in Hungary, research institutions like the Central European University, which had to move from Budapest to Vienna, privatizing higher education, like the whole Hungarian higher education was privatized in 2 weeks. Appointing university leaders based on their loyalty to the government, which is, of course, again, a recurring tool, ignoring previous standards and institutions of quality assurance, basically ignoring anything which is connected to shame. Via academic authorization, science policy secures the legitimacy of all other illiberal states' activities. Illiberal politicians and oligarchs alike recognize the importance of these institutions. And this goes in 3 steps. So first, the different illiberal governments buy with taxpayers' money the different accreditation agencies, like the Times Higher Education list. The Hungarian government bought some we don't know what anyway, but the Hungarian higher educational institutions jumped 30, 40 steps ahead without any change in the structural elements. The second is the impossibility and the inability of the existing institutions which are responsible for quality assurance to stop the illiberal takeover. The good example is the EUNQA, which is the European Quality Assurance Agency, which passed the accreditation of the Hungarian Accreditation Committee with flying colors, exactly in the same year when the MA in Gender Studies was deleted from the accredited study list, and CEU was forced to move from one European Union member country to the other one. So this actually proves that this agency is unable to fulfill its aims. And when I wrote a very angry letter to the president of this organization, the response was, it is not in their mandate to check the academic freedom. So that also something which is really important to understand, that inside the existing institutions, they already uncoupled the quality, as far as quality assurance is concerned, liberal values and quality. And the third tool is simply redoing the list of journals where certain articles are being published. And this is especially important in the field of gender studies, because the internationally ranked journals had been basically delegitimized by the different national accreditation agencies, which put an emphasis on their own national journals. No matter that somebody is publishing in international journals, they won't give points which are important for surviving in academia. So this is not a surprise that this academic authorization is being hijacked by the illiberal forces. And I'm sure that when the colleagues read the new list of college rankings in the US, when no Ivy League school made it to the top 10, Columbia became 34, Harvard was 37, and that also showed that there is a change of the legacy elite to the new elite, where the higher educational quality assurance and the ranking play a really important role. So what can you do when nothing can be done? This kind of epistemological change to change the reference points, what is science, what is good science, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, is happening, while the university system is still there. So it's really obvious that the job hugging is a very good strategy, and also to take part in different trainings, increasing resilience. So in the chat, if you could also post, we are doing a resilience training for academics. This is not scholars who are emigre scholars or refugee scholars, but this is for tenured and hopefully tenured academics who are hoping to stay in a system which is trembling from its foundation. And it also includes a training in self-censorship, because this job hugging also includes how to use productively self-censorship. So in my talk, I was speaking about how the liberal academic policy and science policy is using kind of academic hijacking the academic authorization system, with destroying what is there, hijacking what is there, and setting up their own parallel system. So the question is for the future, how this kind of run between the different educational authorization systems will end. And it depends on us how it will end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kasia Kaczmarska.
Thank you so much for having me. In my intervention, I would like to talk about Russia, and specifically how academic freedom has been affected by state censorship, which has been introduced since 2022 and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I think that we can agree that Russia currently blends elements of authoritarianism, state populism, and wartime censorship. And this, of course, affects higher education and academic freedom to a very significant extent. Of course, academic freedom has never really fared very well in Putin's Russia. But the conflict, the war, really intensified previous trends and introduced new dynamics. So I would like to speak about the effects of the war in 3 areas. The first area is institutional, I call it institutional arrangements for the lack of a better word. The second area is teaching and curricula. And the third area is the epistemic effect of the war, especially on issues such as the discussion of foreign policy. So in the first area of institutional arrangements, with the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the regime really turned to higher education for tangible support, as in particular in ensuring domestic consolidation. Soon after the war started, in March 2022, the most significant organization of university leaders, which is called the Russian Union of Rectors, issued an infamous letter lending support to President Putin, explicitly supporting the aims of the Nazification of Ukraine, which were invoked by the Kremlin. There was, of course, no real discussion among faculty members about the pros and cons of expressing such support. Many Russian scientists signed anti-war collective letters calling for peace and condemning the aggression. Not surprisingly, state propaganda downplayed any anti-war dissent in academia, while state security agencies and university administration used their leverage to intimidate anti-war protesters, both faculty and students. And they used a combination of measures, including prosecutor checks ethics commissions, arrests, charges for disseminating false information, charges for immoral conduct, absenteeism from class, financial penalties, dismissal, lifelong ban on employment in the education sector, and criminal charges, a whole spectrum. Now, this was introduced simultaneously with changes to the curriculum. And one of the key innovations was a course titled The Foundations of the Russian Statehood, which is now compulsory for all first-year students at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. The introduction of this course followed Putin's direct order, which was issued in December 2022, but students in Russia are now obliged to take a few other ideologically colored courses, such as What is Russia, Russia as a State Civilization, Russia's Worldview and Values. The roster of ideologically hued classes varies across institutions and can also include traditional values, the basis of Russian society, and the foundations of national security, which does not really offer any critical any room for critical discussion of what such security means. The third and final area that I would like to speak about is the epistemic effect of this war. The war necessitates both silence regarding any critique of the military, but also creative thinking when it comes to justifying the war, articulating its overarching goals, and imagining an alternative world order. And through a series of regulations, the Russian government has really hindered scholarly debate about the war. Those legal measures include changes to the criminal code, which now offers up to 15 years in prison for disseminating false information about the use of the Russian military and discrediting the use of the Russian military. So anything you could say critical about the war is potentially leading to several up to 15 years in prison. Unsurprisingly, these measures changed the nature of debate within the university, where no one really feels comfortable questioning or condemning the war. Some scholars, however, used this the war quite productively. Some of them have already been recognized previously for their role in public debate on foreign matters. And in a series of publications, those scholars called for re-examining the nuclear taboo and suggested the use of tactical nuclear weapons against NATO states. So did the actual opposite to opposing the war, suggested new ways of engaging in the conflict. To conclude, wartime censorship really damaged scholarly debate in Russia, significantly affected the curriculum, and led many Russian academics to leave the country. The Russian government aimed, and I think so far has been pretty successful, in turning universities into a tool for preemptive compliance and a means to justify state decisions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of things to think about from all three of our panelists. We will be hosting a second panel in this series. It will be on academic freedom and international institutions, looking at regional organizations and efforts to protect academic freedom. So the date is still pending. Stay tuned for that announcement, and thank you all again for joining us.